I'm standing in my family's conference room staring at a contract that could save their dying company. $5 million. That's what they need, and I'm the only one who can give it to them. "Sign here," Dad says, his voice shaking in a way I've never heard before. I pick up the pen and I smile. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand how we got here. Because this isn't just about money. It's about the 10 years they spent telling me I'd never be anything. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Stay until the end. There's a twist you won't see coming. My name is Elena Martinez, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disappointment to the one person who could save them all. The question is, should I? Let me take you back to where it all started. I was 8 years old the first time I realized I was invisible. It was a Tuesday night, and we were having dinner at our house in Houston. The Martinez family. Dad, Mom, my older brother Marcus, and me. Dad owned a mid-sized trucking company, Martinez Transportation. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and then some. I remember being so excited that night. I'd gotten a 95 on my math test, and I couldn't wait to show my parents. I was good at math. Actually, I was good at most things in school, but math just made sense to me in a way it didn't for other kids. "Mom, Dad, look!" I practically bounced in my seat, waving the test paper with the big red A at the top. Mom glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice, honey." Then she turned to Marcus, who was 11 and picking at his mashed potatoes. "Marcus, tell us about your soccer trophy." My brother perked up immediately. "Oh yeah, Coach said I'm the best striker on the team. We won 5-2, and I scored 3 goals. Dad's whole face lit up. He actually put down his fork. "That's my boy. You know, Marcus, that kind of competitive spirit, that's what you need in business. You're going to run this company someday. You've got that instinct, that drive." I looked down at my test paper, still in my hand. The red A suddenly didn't seem so bright anymore. That was the first time, but it wasn't the last. It became a pattern so consistent I could predict it. Marcus did something, made the basketball team, got a B on a test, showed up on time, and it was cause for celebration. I did something, won the science fair, got straight A's, tutored other kids, and it was, "That's nice, honey," before the conversation shifted back to Marcus. I didn't understand it then. I was just a kid. But looking back now, I can see exactly what was happening. In my parents' minds, Marcus was the future. He was the son. The heir, the one who would take over Dad's business and carry on the Martinez name. And me, I was just there. By the time I was 12, the difference in how they treated us was impossible to ignore. Marcus got a new bike for his birthday. I got his old one, repainted. Marcus got to go to expensive basketball camps in the summer. I got to stay home and help Mom with housework. Marcus failed a class and got a tutor. I helped other kids pass their classes and got nothing. The worst part wasn't even the material stuff. It was the attention. Dad took Marcus to the office every Saturday starting when he was 12 years old. "Learning the business," Dad called it. Marcus would come home and talk about trucks and routes and clients, and Dad would listen like Marcus was saying something profound instead of just repeating what Dad had told him. I asked once if I could come too. I was 13. Dad laughed. Not in a mean way, that almost would have been better. He laughed like I'd told a cute joke. "The trucking office isn't really a place for girls, sweetie. Besides, your mom needs help here." What Mom needed help with was laundry and grocery shopping. Meanwhile, Marcus was getting an MBA education in middle school. High school was when things got really obvious. Marcus turned 16 and Dad bought him a brand new Ford F-150. Candy apple red, leather seats, the works. There was a party. Dad made a speech about how Marcus was becoming a man, how proud he was, how this truck represented the Martinez work ethic. I turned 16 2 years later. They gave me Mom's old Honda Civic. No party, no speech, just keys on the kitchen counter and "drive safe, honey." Marcus wanted to go to University of Texas at Austin for their business program. Full ride from Mom and Dad, plus a credit card for expenses, plus a new laptop, plus Dad driving him there personally and helping him move into his dorm. I graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA and got accepted to community college. Community college is fine for you, Mom said when I showed her the acceptance letter. It's practical. You can live at home and save money. I didn't say what I was thinking. Marcus's school costs $40,000 a year, and you're worried about me spending money on community college. But I went. I didn't have a choice. I definitely didn't have the money to pay for anything else. Here's what kills me looking back. I was good, really good. I graduated from community college at the top of my class with a perfect GPA. I got a full scholarship to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Do you know how hard that is? They accept like 3% of applicants. I was so excited when I got the acceptance letter. I thought, finally, they'll see me. They'll see that I'm smart, that I'm capable, that I'm worth paying attention to. I showed them the letter at dinner. Same table, same seats. 10 years after that math test. Dad read it and his face got tight. MIT? Elena, what are you going to do with that? Some computer degree? We need you here. Here? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, it's MIT. It's one of the best schools in the world. It's also in Massachusetts. Mom's voice was sharp. That's halfway across the country. Your brother needs support, not competition. Competition. That word hung in the air like smoke. Marcus didn't even look up from his phone. He was 21 by then, working at the company in a made-up position Dad had created for him. Vice President of Operations. He made $120,000 a year to show up late and take long lunches. You want me to turn down MIT? I said slowly, so I can stay here and... What? Work at the company? If you want, Dad said. We could use someone to help with the administrative work. Filing, answering phones, that kind of thing. It'd be good for you to contribute to the family business. I looked at that MIT letter for a long time. I thought about how hard I'd worked, how many nights I'd stayed up studying while Marcus was out partying, how many times I'd aced tests and gotten nothing more than a pat on the head, how many years I'd spent trying to prove I was worth noticing, and I realized it didn't matter. I could cure cancer, and my parents would ask me why I wasn't helping Marcus with his quarterly reports. I turned down MIT. I stayed in Houston. I got a job at Martinez Transportation as an administrative assistant, which was a fancy way of saying I answered phones and filed paperwork. They paid me minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. Marcus was making $120,000 a year. To do what exactly? Make mistakes that I had to fix? I was 20 years old and I felt like my life was already over. That went on for 2 years. 2 years of watching Marcus get credit for my work, watching my parents praise him for showing up on time, watching the business that could have been mine, should have been mine, get handed to someone who couldn't even manage a spreadsheet without calling me for help. I started teaching myself to code at night. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I was still smart, still capable. Maybe I needed something that was mine that they couldn't take credit for. I got good at it. Really good. I built a software program that optimized delivery routes and cut the company's fuel costs by 30%. 30%. Do you know how much money that is for a trucking company? Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I showed it to Dad, nervous but excited. This was it, right? This was proof that I belonged in the business side of things, not just answering phones. Dad looked at it for maybe 5 minutes. Then he said, "Marcus helped you with this, right?" I stared at him. "What? No, I built this myself. Marcus doesn't even know how to..." "It's good work," Dad interrupted. "Really good. Marcus, come look at what you and Elena put together." Marcus ambled over, saw the program, and had the audacity to say, "Oh yeah, I had some ideas about optimizing routes. Looks like Elena figured out how to code them up. Nice job, sis." 2 weeks later, there was a board meeting. Dad presented Marcus's revolutionary new routing system to the investors. Marcus got a raise. I got a card that said, "Thanks for your hard work," and a $25 Starbucks gift card. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom and stared at the ceiling. I was 22 years old. I was smart enough for MIT. I just saved my family's company hundreds of thousands of dollars, and my own father didn't even believe I could do it without my brother's help. The next morning, I heard Dad on the phone in his office. I was walking past to get coffee, and his door was cracked open. "Elena," he was saying to whoever was on the other end, "she's just there. No ambition, no drive. Not like Marcus. Thank God I have one kid who makes me proud." I stood outside that door for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then I turned around, went back to my room, and wrote out my resignation letter. I gave it to Dad the next morning. He barely looked up from his newspaper. "Probably for the best," he said. "You were never really cut out for this anyway. Maybe you'll find something more suited to your temperament." Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. "Oh, honey," she said when I told her I was quitting. "Well, at least you tried. Maybe you'll meet a nice man and settle down. That's what really matters for girls anyway." I packed my car that afternoon. I had $3,000 saved up. I'd been putting away every spare cent for 2 years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me started. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked as I loaded the last box into my Civic. "Austin," I said. "Austin? What's in Austin?" "I don't know yet," I said. And I meant it. I had no plan, no job lined up, no connections. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house one more day. I drove out of Houston that evening. I didn't cry until I hit the city limits. Then I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. I wasn't crying because I was sad to leave. I was crying because I was 22 years old and I just realized that my own parents didn't believe in me. Maybe they never had. Austin was hard at first. Really hard. I found a tiny studio apartment in a rough neighborhood for $600 a month. I got a job as a barista at a coffee shop, making minimum wage plus tips. I took on freelance coding projects at night, building websites and apps for small businesses for a few $100 a pop. I ate a lot of ramen. I wore the same 5 outfits on rotation. I didn't have money for entertainment, so I spent my free time in the public library, reading books about programming and artificial intelligence and machine learning. But here's the thing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. Nobody was comparing me to Marcus. Nobody was dismissing my accomplishments. When I did something good, it was mine. The coffee shop was called Brews and Views, and it had terrible Wi-Fi but good natural light. I worked the morning shift, 5 a.m. to noon, and then I'd stay after my shift to code on my beat-up laptop. That's where I met Sarah Chen. She came in one Tuesday morning, ordered a black coffee, and sat down at the table next to mine during my break. I was working on a machine learning algorithm, trying to get it to predict shipping delays based on weather patterns and traffic data. It was frustrating as hell. The code kept breaking, and I couldn't figure out why. "You've got a missing bracket on line 47, a voice said. I looked up. It was the black coffee woman. She was looking at my screen with interest, not judgment. "How did you—" I started. "I've been coding for 25 years, she said. "You develop an eye for it. What are you building?" I explained the project. She asked good questions. Really good questions. The kind that showed she understood not just the code, but the business application behind it. "You're self-taught?" she asked, after we'd been talking for 20 minutes. "Mostly, yeah. I took some community college courses, but everything else is from books and online." She was quiet for a moment, studying me. "How would you like a job?" I laughed. I thought she was joking. "Doing what?" "I run a tech startup here in Austin. We build supply chain optimization software. Based on what I'm seeing here, you'd be a good fit. I'll pay you $60,000 to start, plus equity. I'll also teach you everything I know." I stared at her. $60,000. That was more than Marcus made when he first started at our family company, and he'd had a college degree and Dad pulling strings. "Why?" I asked. "You don't even know me." Sarah smiled. "I know talent when I see it, and I know what it looks like when someone's been underestimated. So what do you say?" I said yes. Obviously, I said yes. That was 6 years ago. I was 22, broke, and living on ramen, Sarah Chen gave me my first real shot. Working for Sarah was like discovering I'd been living in black and white my whole life, and someone just turned on the color. She didn't just teach me to code better, she taught me to think differently, to see problems not as obstacles, but as puzzles waiting to be solved. The startup was called Supply Flow, and we were building AI-powered software to optimize inventory and shipping for e-commerce companies. Sarah had 5 other employees when I started. I was the youngest by a decade. But Sarah didn't care about age. She cared about ideas. In my first week, I suggested a modification to our algorithm that would reduce processing time by 40%. She listened, tested it, and implemented it. Then she called a company meeting and gave me credit in front of everyone. I almost cried. It was the first time someone had acknowledged my work without trying to diminish it or hand the credit to someone else. "You have a gift for this," Sarah told me one evening when we were working late. "Not just the technical side, the vision. You see how systems connect. That's rare." "I worked in logistics," I said. "My family's company. I just paid attention, I guess." "Your family's in logistics, and they didn't see this talent?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Their loss is my gain." I didn't tell her the whole story. Not yet. But she knew enough. Over the next year, I threw myself into the work. I was usually the first one in the office and the last one to leave. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. I was doing it because I loved it. For the first time in my life, I was good at something, and people noticed. I moved out of the studio apartment into a nicer one-bedroom. I started saving money. I bought clothes that weren't from Goodwill. Small things, but they mattered. Sarah promoted me to senior AI engineer when I was 24. I was making $150,000 a year, more than Marcus. That thought made me smile every time I got my direct deposit notification. But I didn't tell my family. We barely spoke anyway. Mom would text occasionally, "Hope you're doing okay out there," or "Miss you, sweetie." But the messages felt obligatory. I never responded with more than, "I'm fine, thanks." They probably thought I was struggling, working some dead-end job, barely scraping by. Let them think that. I was too busy building something real to care about their assumptions. When I was 25, Sarah called me into her office one morning. I thought maybe I was in trouble. She had that serious expression on her face that usually meant something big was happening. "Elena," she said, "I have a proposition for you." "Okay. I want to spin off our AI division into its own company, the supply chain optimization piece. It's too big for Supply Flow. It needs its own focus, its own funding, its own team." I nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I want you to co-found it with me, 50-50 partnership. We'll call it Logichain AI. You'll be the CTO. I'll handle the business side initially, but this will be as much yours as mine." I couldn't speak. Co-founder, chief technology officer, equal partner with someone I admired more than anyone I'd ever met. "Why me?" I finally managed. "Because you're the most talented engineer I've ever worked with," Sarah said simply, "and because you understand both the tech and the business. That's incredibly rare. Plus, you have something else." She leaned forward. "You have something to prove. Not to me, not to anyone else, to yourself. That's the best kind of motivation." She was right. I did have something to prove, but not in the way I used to. I wasn't trying to show my family I was worthy anymore. I was trying to show myself what I was capable of when someone actually believed in me. We filed the paperwork for Logichain AI the next week. Sarah invested $100,000 of her own money to get us started. I invested $20,000, every penny I'd saved over 3 years. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. We spent 6 months building the product, just the 2 of us and 2 other engineers Sarah brought on. We worked out of a co-working space in downtown Austin, surviving on coffee and tacos and the kind of desperate optimism that defines every startup. The technology we were building was genuinely revolutionary. We used machine learning to predict supply chain disruptions before they happened, weather delays, traffic patterns, port congestion, even political instability. Then our AI would automatically reroute shipments and re-optimize inventory in real time. It sounds simple when I explain it now. It was anything but simple to build. We pitched to investors for our seed round. I was terrified. I'd never done anything like that before. But Sarah coached me, and when I started talking about the technology, something clicked. I knew this stuff inside and out. I could explain how every algorithm worked, why every decision we made was the right one. We raised $2 million. I couldn't believe it. $2 million because investors believed in something I'd built. My share, as a 50% owner, meant I was suddenly worth $1 million on paper. A year earlier, I'd been eating ramen and wondering if I'd made a huge mistake leaving my family. Now I was a millionaire, at least theoretically. We used that money to hire a real team, 10 engineers, 2 salespeople, a marketing person. We moved into a real office, we bought good equipment, and we started building relationships with major logistics companies. The first big client we landed was a regional shipping company based in Dallas. They were skeptical at first. How could 2 women in their 20s revolutionize an industry that had been doing things the same way for decades? But we gave them a trial run. 3 months of our software running alongside their existing systems. By the end of month 1, we'd saved them $200,000 in efficiency gains. By month 3, they signed a 5-year contract worth $10 million. That contract changed everything. Suddenly, we weren't a risky startup. We were a proven solution. Other companies wanted in. The clients kept coming. When I was 26, we closed our Series A funding round, $15 million from a top-tier venture capital firm. Our valuation hit $100 million overnight. I was sitting in Sarah's office when we got the term sheet. We'd been waiting for days, barely sleeping, refreshing our email constantly. When it finally came through, we just stared at each other for a full minute. Then Sarah started laughing. Then I started laughing. Then we were both laughing and crying and hugging, and the whole office gathered around, wondering what was happening. "We did it," Sarah said. "Elena, we actually did it." My share of the company was worth $25 million. $25 million. I was 26 years old. I thought about calling my parents. Just for a second, I thought about picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, remember how you said I had no ambition? Want to hear about my company?" But I didn't. Because it hit me in that moment. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd spent my whole life desperate for them to see me, to acknowledge me, to tell me I was good enough. But I'd found something better than their approval. I'd found my own. The tech industry started taking notice. Forbes reached out for an interview. They were doing their 30 under 30 list and wanted to feature LogIChain. I was hesitant. I'd never been comfortable with attention. But Sarah convinced me. "This isn't about you," she said. "It's about showing other young women, especially women who've been told they're not good enough, that they can do this too." That argument worked. I did the interview. The article came out 3 months later. There was a photo of me in our office standing in front of a whiteboard covered in algorithms. The headline read, "Elena Martinez, 26, is revolutionizing supply chain logistics with AI." The article talked about the technology, the funding, the growth. It mentioned I was self-taught, that I'd started with nothing, that major companies like Walmart and Amazon were piloting our software. It didn't mention my family. I didn't tell the reporter about them. That part of my life felt like it belonged to a different person. We kept growing. By the time I was 27, we had 40 employees. We'd signed contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Our revenue was in the tens of millions. We were being courted by major corporations wanting to acquire us. But Sarah and I weren't interested in selling. We were building something we believed in. I bought a house. Nothing crazy. A small 3-bedroom in East Austin, but it was mine. I had a yard. I had a home office where I could work on new algorithms. I had a life. I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. The kind of happy that comes from knowing you've earned everything you have, that no one can take credit for your success, that you built something real and valuable and yours. I thought about my family sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep, when the algorithms wouldn't come together and I needed a break from staring at code. I wondered if they thought about me, if they ever Googled my name and found the Forbes article, if they ever realized they'd been wrong about me. But mostly I didn't think about them at all. I was too busy living the life they'd never believed I could have. And then, 8 years after I'd left Houston, my grandmother died. Abuela Rosa had been the one person in my family who'd always been kind to me. She was my dad's mother, this tiny, fierce woman who'd immigrated from Mexico and built a life through sheer determination. She used to tell me stories about growing up poor, about learning English by reading newspapers in the public library, about working 3 jobs to put my dad through school. "You have my eyes," she'd tell me, "and my stubbornness. Don't let anyone make you small, mija." She was the only one who came to my community college graduation, the only one who asked about my life when I called, the only one who seemed to see me as a person, not just as not Marcus. I was 28 when she passed. Mom called to tell me, her voice tight and formal. "The funeral is Saturday," she said. "I assume you'll be coming." Not "please come" or "we'd love to see you." Just the assumption that I'd show up because that's what family does. I almost said no. I'd been gone for 8 years. I'd built an entirely new life. Did I really need to go back to Houston and face the people who'd never believed in me? But it was Abuela. She'd believed in me when no one else did. I owed her that much. So I booked a flight. I didn't tell anyone I was coming except Mom. I definitely didn't mention that I was coming in from Austin in a Tesla, wearing a Burberry coat with a net worth that would make their eyes water. I wanted to pay my respects to Abuela. That was all. Get in, go to the funeral, get out, don't engage, don't explain, don't justify. That was the plan anyway. The flight to Houston felt longer than it should have. I kept telling myself this was just about Abuela. Pay respects, attend the funeral, leave. Simple. I landed Friday evening. The funeral was Saturday afternoon. I'd booked a hotel room. There was no way I was staying at my parents' house. I checked in, unpacked my single bag, and tried not to think about the fact that I was back in the city I'd fled 8 years ago. Mom had texted me the details. Viewing Friday night. Funeral Saturday at 2. Reception at the house afterward. Standard stuff. I showed up to the viewing at 7. The funeral home was one of those places that tries too hard to be comforting. Soft lighting, pale blue walls, fake flowers everywhere. I signed the guest book with my name, noting that I was probably the only Martinez who'd bothered to sign it. Marcus never paid attention to details like that. The casket was at the front of the room, surrounded by actual flowers. Abuela would have liked those. She loved gardening, even when her hands got too arthritic to really do it anymore. I stood there for a long time, looking at her peaceful face. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. I hadn't seen her in 8 years. That realization hit hard. I'd been so focused on escaping my parents that I'd also cut myself off from the one person who'd actually loved me. "I'm sorry I didn't visit more," I whispered. "But I think you'd be proud of me, Abuela. I did what you said. I didn't let anyone make me small." "Elena?" I turned. Mom was standing there in a black dress, looking older than her 58 years. There were new lines around her eyes, gray streaking through her dark hair. "Hi, Mom." We didn't hug. We'd never been a hugging family, at least not with me. She looked me up and down, taking in my designer coat, my nice dress, my expensive shoes. I saw the calculation in her eyes, but she didn't comment. "You look well," she said finally. "Thanks. You too." Awkward silence. 8 years, and we had nothing to say to each other. "Your father and Marcus are in the other room greeting guests," she said. "You should say hello." Should. Not they'd love to see you or they missed you. Just another obligation on the checklist. "In a minute," I said. "I want to spend some time here first." Mom nodded and walked away. I heard her heels clicking on the tile floor, fading into the murmur of voices from the other room. I stayed with Abuela for another 20 minutes. Then I steeled myself and walked into the reception area. The room was full of people I half recognized. business associates of my father's mostly. Men in suits, women in conservative dresses, everyone speaking in those hushed funeral tones. I saw my Uncle Roberto in the corner, a few cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, and there, holding court in the center of the room, was my father and Marcus. Dad looked older, too. He'd put on weight, and his hair had gone completely gray, but he still had that commanding presence, that assumption that he was the most important person in any room. Marcus stood next to him, 31 now, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite fit right. He'd always been handsome in that easy, privileged way some men are, but there was something about him now that looked tired, stressed maybe. They were talking to a small group of men. I recognized one of them, Tom Patterson, who owned a competing logistics company. Dad and Tom had been friendly rivals for years. I walked over slowly, not sure if I wanted to interrupt, but knowing I had to get this over with. Marcus saw me first. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed as he took in my appearance. "Elena?" Dad turned, and for a second I saw genuine surprise on his face, like he'd forgotten I existed, and my presence was an unexpected reminder. "Elena," he said, "you came. Not, 'it's good to see you,' or 'I'm glad you're here.' Just acknowledgement of the bare minimum I'd shown up." "Of course," I said quietly. "It's Abuela." "Right, yes." Dad cleared his throat. "Well, Tom, Roberto, you remember my daughter Elena. She's been in Austin, doing her own thing." Doing my own thing. 8 years of my life reduced to a dismissive phrase. "Nice to see you again, Elena," Tom said politely. He clearly didn't remember me. I'd been 17 the last time we'd met, and I'd been unmemorable even then. Marcus was still staring at me. "So, Elena," he said, and I could hear the condescension in his voice, that same tone he'd always used. "Still in Austin? What are you up to these days?" Here it was, the moment where I could tell them. Where I could say, "Actually, I'm the CTO of a $100 million company. I'm on Forbes 30 Under 30 list. I'm revolutionizing an entire industry." But something stopped me. Maybe it was the setting. We were at Abuela's funeral, for God's sake. Maybe it was the fact that I'd worked so hard to move past needing their validation. Or maybe I just wanted to see how they'd treat me when they thought I was nobody. "Just working in tech," I said, vaguely. "Doing some computer stuff." I saw the flash of satisfaction in Marcus's eyes. "See," his expression said. "I was right about her all along." "Tech, huh?" Marcus turned to the group with a slight smile. "Not everyone can handle the pressure of real business, right? My sister's more the creative type. Computers, coding, that kind of thing. It's good she found something that works for her." The implication was clear. What I did wasn't real business. Not like what he did running Dad's company into the ground while thinking he was a genius. Tom Patterson nodded politely, clearly not interested. "Well, good for you, Elena. Tech is certainly a growing field." "Actually," Dad said, his voice taking on that booming quality he used when he wanted everyone to pay attention, "Marcus here just closed a major deal with Hartman Logistics. Tell them about it, son." And just like that, I was dismissed. Marcus launched into a story about some client he'd supposedly landed, and everyone turned to listen to him. I stood there for another minute, invisible again, then quietly excused myself. No one noticed me leave. I should have left the funeral home right then, gone back to my hotel, skipped the actual funeral tomorrow, flown back to Austin, and forgotten about all of this. But I stayed because of Abuela. The next day, I arrived at the church 15 minutes before the service started. I sat in the back, planning to slip out right after. The church filled up slowly. More business associates, more family members I barely knew. Mom and Dad and Marcus sat in the front row, the grieving family accepting condolences and hugs. The service was beautiful. The priest talked about Abuela's faith, her strength, her devotion to family. I cried quietly, remembering the woman who'd seen me when no one else did. After the service, everyone headed to my parents' house for the reception. I thought about skipping it, but Mom had seen me in the church and would definitely notice if I didn't show. So I drove to the house I'd grown up in, parked on the street, and walked inside. The house hadn't changed much. Same furniture, same family photos on the walls. I noticed the photos were mostly of Marcus, his high school graduation, his college graduation, him at the company. A few family photos that included me, but I was always slightly out of frame, slightly out of focus. The living room and dining room were packed with people. Caterers were serving food. Everyone was talking in that way people do at funerals, sad but also relieved, telling stories about the deceased, catching up with people they hadn't seen in a while. I grabbed a glass of water and found a corner to stand in. I was planning my escape route when I noticed two men standing near the dining room table, both watching me with interested expressions. One was Asian, maybe mid-40s in an expensive suit. The other was white, 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes. They looked out of place somehow, too polished, too aware. Not like Dad's usual business associates. The Asian man leaned over and said something to the other man, who nodded slowly. They were looking at me. Why were they looking at me? Before I could figure it out, Marcus appeared at my elbow with a plate of food. "Pretty good turnout," he said, like we were at a networking event instead of our grandmother's funeral. "Yeah. So," he took a bite of a sandwich. "Austin, tech stuff. That must be interesting." I could hear what he wasn't saying. Boring, unimpressive, not worth discussing. "It is," I said simply. "I mean, someone has to do that kind of work, right?" He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "The behind-the-scenes stuff, the support roles, can't all be in leadership." I sipped my water and said nothing. "Things are going great for me, by the way," Marcus continued, "because of course he did. Dad's talking about making me CEO in the next year or two. The company's expanding. We're landing major contracts. It's a lot of pressure, but someone has to step up, you know?" "Mm-hmm. Must be nice, though. Your life, I mean. Low pressure, just doing your thing. No one depending on you. No real responsibility." He said it like he was being kind, like he was acknowledging that my simple little life had its own charm. I was about to respond when I heard Dad's voice from across the room, loud enough that several people turned to look. "Elena, she's trying to find herself in Austin, you know how it is. We're just grateful she's healthy and safe. Success isn't everything, right?" He was talking to someone I couldn't see, but the words carried across the room. Several people glanced at me with sympathy. Poor Elena, the disappointing daughter. Marcus saw my expression and had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. He's stressed about the business lately. He doesn't mean..." "Yes, he does," I said quietly. "He means exactly what he said." I set down my water glass and walked outside to the backyard. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to remember why I'd spent 8 years staying away from these people. The backyard was empty except for a few smokers clustered near the fence. I walked to the far end, near where Abuela's garden used to be. Someone had let it go to weeds. That hurt more than it should have. I was standing there, trying not to cry, when I heard footsteps behind me. "Elena Martinez?" I turned. It was the Asian man from inside, the one who'd been watching me. "Yes?" He smiled warmly and extended his hand. "David Wu. I'm a managing partner at Redwood Ventures. I'm sorry for your loss." I shook his hand, confused. Redwood Ventures was one of the biggest VC firms in Silicon Valley. What was he doing at my grandmother's funeral? "Thank you," I said carefully. "Did you know my grandmother?" "I knew her briefly years ago. She was a remarkable woman." He paused. "But I have to ask, are you Elena Martinez of Logi Chain AI? My stomach dropped. Yes. His smile widened. "I thought so. I recognized you from the Forbes article, but I wasn't sure until just now. You look different without the whiteboard behind you." I didn't know what to say. This man knew who I was. Really knew who I was. "I have to tell you," David continued, "your Series A pitch was one of the best I've seen in 20 years of venture capital. We were disappointed Sequoia got to you first. Though I suppose we shouldn't have been surprised, Sarah Chen has an eye for talent. Thank you, I managed. That's very kind. Kind? He laughed. It's the truth. LogiChain is revolutionizing supply chain logistics. My firm has been watching your growth closely. We'd love to participate in your Series B when you're ready. The other man had joined us, the one with graying hair. Robert Hayes, he said, shaking my hand. I'm the CEO of Hartman Logistics. I believe your brother mentioned us inside? Oh, God, Marcus's big contract with this man's company. We pilot tested your software last quarter, Robert continued. Saved us $43 million in 6 months. We signed a 5-year contract with LogiChain last month. Your AI is absolutely brilliant. I felt like the ground was tilting under my feet. Thank you. Your family must be incredibly proud, David said. Then he glanced back at the house, his expression thoughtful. Although, from what I overheard inside, I'm gathering they don't know. They don't know, I said quietly. Robert and David exchanged a long look. Well, Robert said carefully, I think they're about to. They walked back inside together, and I followed, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment I'd half fantasized about for 8 years. The moment they'd find out that the daughter they'd dismissed, the sister they'd pitied, wasn't who they thought she was. Inside, Marcus was holding court again, telling the same story about the Hartman Logistics deal. And that's when Robert Hayes himself called to say we'd landed the contract. 5 years, major revenue, this is going to change everything for Martinez Transportation. Excuse me, Marcus, Robert's voice cut through the conversation. The room got quiet fast. Robert Hayes was the kind of man whose presence commanded attention. I couldn't help but overhear. I think there might be some confusion about our contract. Marcus's smile faltered. Confusion? No, we negotiated for months, and we certainly did negotiate with Martinez Transportation, Robert said smoothly, for your company to become a client of LogiChain AI's software platform. I'm not sure I'd characterize it as you landing us, so much as us landing you as a customer, though the distinction perhaps doesn't matter. Dad had appeared looking confused. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Marcus brought you in as a client. Actually, David Wu stepped forward. I think what Robert is getting at is that Hartman Logistics isn't Martinez Transportation's client. They're LogiChain AI's client. And Martinez Transportation is also LogiChain's client. Your company licenses their software. Right, Dad said slowly, still not understanding. The software that Marcus helped implement, the software that Elena built, Robert said. The room went silent. Dad looked at Robert, then at David, then at me. What? David Wu pulled out his phone. Mr. Martinez, I'm not sure if you're aware, but your daughter is the co-founder and chief technology officer of LogiChain AI. They raised $15 million in Series A funding last year. Current valuation is just over $100 million. He turned his phone around, showing the Forbes article. My face stared out from the screen. Elena Martinez, 28, David read, is revolutionizing supply chain logistics with artificial intelligence. Her company, LogiChain AI, has attracted major clients including Walmart, Amazon, Target, and Hartman Logistics. Industry experts predict LogiChain will be valued at over $1 billion within 5 years. I watched my father's face as the words registered. The confusion, the disbelief, the dawning realization. Marcus was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. That's not... Elena doesn't. She works in Austin doing computer stuff. She works in Austin building artificial intelligence that's changing an entire industry, Robert said quietly. When I mentioned to your father that we'd landed Hartman as a client, I assumed he knew his daughter had built the software we're using. The software that saved us $43 million. The software that's frankly the only reason we're still in business. Mom had gone pale. Elena, is this true? Before I could answer, someone else in the crowd spoke up. Oh my God, you're right. That is her. I saw her on TechCrunch last month. There was an article about female founders. Another person. Logi Chain AI. They're huge. I tried to invest in their Series A but couldn't get in. Someone else pulled out their phone. Then another person. Within seconds, half the room was Googling my name, reading articles, looking at my LinkedIn profile. The whispers started. She built that? Elena Martinez? $100 million valuation? They had no idea? How do you not know your own daughter did this? I stood there, feeling exposed and vindicated and terrified all at once. This wasn't how I'd wanted them to find out, or maybe it was exactly how I'd wanted them to find out, with witnesses, with proof they couldn't deny, with undeniable evidence that they'd been wrong about me. Dad found his voice first. Elena, why didn't you tell us? 8 years of hurt and anger rose up in my throat, but we were at Abuela's funeral, surrounded by people, and I still had enough self-control not to make a scene. I need some air, I said quietly. I walked out the front door and got in my car. I didn't look back. My phone started buzzing before I'd even reached the hotel. Mom, Marcus, Dad, text after text. Mom, Elena, please call us. We need to talk. Marcus, what the hell? When were you going to tell us? Dad, this is a family matter. Come back to the house. I turned off my phone and sat in my hotel room, shaking. They knew. After 8 years, they finally knew. And I had no idea what came next. The next 3 months were strange. My family didn't leave me alone. The texts and calls kept coming, even after I flew back to Austin. At first, they tried to act like they'd always been supportive. Mom, we always knew you were special, honey. So proud of you. Yeah, right. So proud they'd told everyone at the funeral I was trying to find myself. Marcus tried a different approach. Hey sis, been thinking about your business. Maybe we could collaborate. I've got some ideas. I didn't respond to any of them. I threw myself back into work. We were in the middle of negotiations for our Series B funding round, and I didn't have time to deal with my family's sudden interest in my life. Sarah noticed I was distracted. We were in her office reviewing pitch materials when she set down her pen and looked at me. What happened in Houston? She asked. You've been off since you got back. I told her everything. The funeral, the reveal, the aftermath. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I want to ignore them and move on with my life. But they're my family, I said, hating how weak that sounded. Shouldn't family mean something? Family means what you make it mean, Sarah said. Blood doesn't entitle people to your time, your energy, or your success, especially not people who treated you the way they did. She was right. I knew she was right. But then Dad called. Not texted, actually called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Elena. His voice sounded strained. Please don't hang up. I'm listening. I need to talk to you in person. It's about the business. Your business isn't my concern, Dad. I know I have no right to ask, but please, one meeting. Then I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Desperation, maybe, or fear. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop in Austin a week later, neutral ground. I got there early and ordered a black coffee, then sat at a corner table where I could see the door. Dad arrived 10 minutes late, looking exhausted. The weight he'd put on was more noticeable now. His suit was expensive but rumpled. He looked like a man who wasn't sleeping well. He sat down across from me without ordering anything. Thank you for meeting me, he said. I waited. I'm just going to say it straight, he said. Martinez Transportation is in trouble. Bad trouble. We've lost 40% of our revenue in the past 2 years. We're hemorrhaging money. Our competitors have all modernized their systems. They're using AI, automation, everything we should have implemented years ago. We didn't, and now we're paying for it. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. We've tried to adapt, he continued. Marcus has been working with consultants trying to overhaul our operations, but it's not enough. We need a major capital investment to upgrade our entire infrastructure. We need $5 million. There it was. And you're telling me this because you're the only person we know who could make that kind of investment, Dad said. You have the capital. You understand the industry. You could save us. The audacity was breathtaking. 8 years of silence, and now he wanted $5 million. Why would I do that? I asked quietly. Because we're family. He said it like it was obvious, like those words erased everything else. Family, I repeated. The family that told me I had no ambition. The family that gave Marcus a VP title while I answered phones for minimum wage. The family that thought I was a failure for 8 years and didn't bother to check if they were right. Dad flinched. Elena, I know we made mistakes. Mistakes? I set down my coffee cup carefully. Mistakes are accidents. What you did was deliberate. You decided I wasn't worth investing in. You decided Marcus was the future and I was just there. We were wrong, he said, and I heard real anguish in his voice. We were so wrong, Elena. But please don't punish the whole company, all our employees, because of our mistakes. Marcus has been working day and night trying to save the business. Your mother is worried sick. This company is our legacy. It's everything we built. It's everything you built, I interrupted. I was never part of it. You made that very clear. We sat in silence for a moment. If I do this, I said slowly, what's in it for me? Dad's expression shifted. Relief, hope, calculation. The businessman coming back to the surface. We'd give you a stake in the company, 20%, maybe 30%. 51%, I said. He stared at me. What? If I invest $5 million, I want controlling interest, 51%. I make the decisions. I hire who I want. I fire who I want. I modernize the operations my way. Elena, that's essentially taking over the company. Yes, I said simply. It is. I built that company from nothing, Dad said, his voice rising. It's my name on the door. I can't just hand it over. Then find another investor. I stood up. But we both know no one else will take this risk. Your company is outdated, poorly managed, and failing. I'm offering you a lifeline. Take it or don't. I walked out of the coffee shop and drove straight to the office. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Sarah took one look at my face and pulled me into her office. Your dad asked you to invest in his company, she guessed. $5 million. He wants me to save them. And I told him I'd only do it if I got controlling interest, 51%. Sarah studied me. Do you actually want to take over their company? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to prove I can do what they never thought I could. Part of me wants to watch them lose everything the way they made me feel like nothing. And part of me just wants to walk away and never think about them again. All valid options, Sarah said. But Elena, here's what I know about you. You're not vindictive. You're not cruel. If you take over that company, you'll do it right. You'll save it, you'll save their jobs, you'll modernize it and make it profitable. And you know what they'll do? What? They'll resent you for it. They'll find ways to make it your fault when things go wrong and their credit when things go right. You'll never get the acknowledgement you're looking for because they're not capable of giving it. She was right. Deep down, I knew she was right. But 3 days later, Dad called again. We'll do it, he said. 51%. We need you, Elena. We need you. Words I'd been desperate to hear my whole life, finally spoken when they wanted something from me. I should have said no. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to walk away, but I agreed to one more meeting, just to hear them out. This time, all 3 of them came. Dad, Mom, and Marcus. We met in a conference room at my office. I wanted them on my turf. They walked in looking uncomfortable. This was my space, my success, my world. They were the outsiders here. Thank you for seeing us, Mom said. She dressed up like this was a job interview. Maybe it was. We all sat around the conference table. My assistant had printed out the contract terms I'd drafted with our lawyers. $5 million investment, 51% controlling stake, complete operational authority. I slid the contracts across the table. Dad picked it up, read through it slowly. His jaw tightened as he got to the terms. This gives you total control. I'd be working for you. Yes? Marcus would report to a COO of your choosing. Yes? The Martinez name would stay on the company, but you'd make all final decisions. That's correct. He set down the contract and looked at me. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in my life. When did you become so hard? He asked quietly. The question hit harder than I expected. I'm not hard, I said. I'm just done being soft. There's a difference. Marcus had been reading over Dad's shoulder. This is insane. Elena, we're family. You can't just take over our company. I'm not taking over anything, I said calmly. You asked me to invest. These are my terms. You can accept them or decline them. Your choice. But you're being vindictive, Marcus insisted. You're punishing us because what? I looked at him directly. Because you spent our entire lives telling me I wasn't good enough? Because you took credit for my work? Because when I left, not one of you called to see if I was okay? Because for 8 years, you all assumed I was failing, and you were fine with that? We weren't fine with it, Mom said, her voice shaking. We worried about you. Did you? I asked. Did you worry enough to call, to visit, to ask how I was doing? Or did you just tell yourselves I was finding my own path and then forget about me? Silence. I thought so, I said. Dad cleared his throat. So this is revenge. No, I said, and I meant it. Revenge would be watching you fail. This is business. You need capital. You need expertise. You need someone who understands modern logistics systems. I can provide all of that. But I won't do it on your terms anymore. I spent 22 years living by your rules, trying to meet your expectations, desperate for your approval. I'm done with that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Austin's skyline. When I left Houston, I was broke and terrified and convinced you were right about me, I said, not turning around. I thought maybe I really was the failure you saw. It took years to unlearn that, to realize that your opinion of me said more about you than it did about me. I turned back to face them. I'm offering you this deal because despite everything, I don't want to see the company fail. Not for your sake, for the 200 people you employ who didn't do anything wrong. But I won't pretend we're a happy family coming together. I won't pretend this erases the past. This is a business transaction, nothing more. Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. And if we say no? Then you find another investor who'll accept whatever terms you're comfortable with. Though I suspect if someone else was willing to take this risk, you wouldn't be here. More silence. I watched emotions play across their faces. Pride, anger, desperation, shame. Finally, Dad reached for a pen. Wait, I said. He looked up. Before you sign anything, I need to know something. I looked at each of them in turn. Why now? If I'd stayed in Houston, if I'd never left, would you have ever seen me? Would you have ever believed I was capable of something like this? None of them answered. That's what I thought, I said quietly. You don't respect me. You respect my bank account. And you know what? I've made my peace with that, but I won't pretend it's something it's not. I picked up the contract and put it back in its folder. I'm not going to invest, I said. Dad's face went white. Elena, not under these terms, not under any terms. But you said, I said I'd hear you out. I did. And what I heard is exactly what I expected. You don't want my help. You want my money. You want to be saved without having to acknowledge why you need saving in the first place. I walked to the door and opened it. Martinez Transportation is failing because you refuse to adapt, refuse to innovate, refuse to listen to anyone who disagreed with you. I tried to tell you 8 years ago that you needed to modernize. You ignored me. You've had 8 years to figure this out, and instead, you kept doing the same thing, expecting different results. So you're just going to let us fail? Marcus's voice was sharp with anger. Let 200 people lose their jobs because you're mad at Dad. I'm not letting you do anything, I said. You did this yourselves, and those 200 employees, they deserve better than bosses who can't adapt and won't change. Maybe whoever buys your company in bankruptcy will actually value them. Elena, please. Mom's voice cracked. Don't do this. We're sorry. We're so sorry for everything. We should have believed in you. We should have supported you. We were wrong. Please don't punish us like this. I'm not punishing you, I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. There was no anger left, just a strange kind of peace. I'm just choosing me. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what's best for me instead of what you want from me. And what's best for you is watching your family lose everything. Dad's voice was hard again, the businessman trying one last negotiation tactic. What's best for me, I said slowly, is building a life where my worth doesn't depend on your approval. You taught me something valuable, Dad. You taught me that some people will never see your value until they need something from you. And when that happens, the best thing you can do is walk away. I stepped out into the hallway. Find another investor, build a better business. Treat people better than you treated me, or don't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. I closed the door behind me. My assistant looked up from her desk, clearly having heard everything. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, and realized it was true. I actually am. I walked back to my office, sat down, and looked out at the city I'd built my life in. The city where I'd arrived with $3,000 and a broken heart. The city where I'd met Sarah, where I'd discovered what I was capable of, where I'd built something real. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. You'll regret this. I deleted it without responding. Another text, this time from Marcus. Real nice, Elena. Real nice. Deleted. Mom. I don't understand how you can be so cruel. I stared at that one for a long time. Then I typed out a response. I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. You want me to save you because it benefits you, not because you actually value me. And I spent too many years accepting scraps of affection to settle for that now. I hope you find a solution, but it won't be me. I hit send, then blocked all 3 of them. 6 months later, I heard through the Houston business community that Martinez Transportation had filed for bankruptcy. The company was bought by Hartman Logistics for pennies on the dollar. Robert Hayes kept most of the employees and modernized the whole operation using LogIChain's software. Dad and Marcus were out. The company they'd built, or rather that Dad had built and Marcus had run into the ground, was gone. I felt sad about it, but not guilty. They'd had every opportunity to do things differently. They'd chosen not to. Meanwhile, LogIChain closed our Series B round, $50 million at a $300 million valuation. We were expanding internationally, hiring like crazy, signing contracts with companies around the world. Sarah and I were in her office celebrating when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Elena, it's Sandra Wu. I'm a guidance counselor at Austin High School. Okay. I have a student here I think you should meet. Her name is Maya. She's 17, incredibly bright, especially with computers and math. But her family... Sandra paused. They don't support her. They want her to take over the family restaurant instead of going to college. She reminds me of someone. A Forbes article I read about a young woman who built a company from nothing despite her family not believing in her. I was quiet for a moment, remembering who I'd been at 17, desperate for approval, convinced I wasn't good enough, ready to give up my dreams because my family said they didn't matter. When can I meet her? I asked. Tomorrow, after school? I'll be there. I met Maya the next day. She was small, nervous, brilliant. She showed me a program she'd built on an ancient laptop, a scheduling system for her parents' restaurant that optimized staffing based on predicted customer flow. It was rough, but the underlying logic was sound. "This is really good," I told her. "Have you thought about studying computer science?" Her face lit up, then fell. "My parents won't pay for college. They say it's a waste, that I should stay and help with the restaurant. They say girls don't need fancy degrees." I heard my mother's voice. "Maybe you'll meet a nice man and settle down. That's what really matters for girls anyway." "Can I tell you something?" I said. 8 years ago, I turned down a full scholarship to MIT because my family said I was needed at home. I thought they were right. I thought my dreams didn't matter as much as their expectations. Maya looked at me with wide eyes. "I was wrong," I continued. "And you're wrong too if you think you have to choose their dreams over yours. You don't owe anyone your potential, Maya, not even family." "But I don't have money for school," she said quietly. "Even if I applied—" "Apply," I said. "Apply everywhere. And if you get in and need help with tuition, you call me. Here's my card. I mean it." She took the card with shaking hands. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone did it for me when I needed it most," I said, thinking of Sarah. "And because I spent too many years thinking I wasn't worth investing in. You are. Your dreams matter. Your potential matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I left that meeting and drove back to my office, thinking about the girl I'd been and the woman I'd become. I thought about my family and how they'd probably never understand what they'd lost. I thought about how success didn't need their approval to be real, and I thought about Abuela, who'd told me not to let anyone make me small. "I didn't, Abuela," I said out loud in my empty car. "I became exactly as big as I was meant to be." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Board meeting in 20. Ready to change the world?" I smiled and texted back, "Always." The girl who'd been told she had no ambition, no drive, no potential, had built a company worth hundreds of millions. The girl who'd been dismissed and ignored and underestimated had proven everyone wrong, not because she needed to, but because she'd finally believed in herself. And that was better than any revenge could ever be.